I just want to say if you're watching the video version, this is my cat Boomy. Everyone say hi to Boomy. Like Boomy from Avatar: The Last Airbender. He's a little bit of a crazy cat, but that's okay. We still love him. And he's going to hang out in here while we chit chat. But hello, bestie. How are you doing today? I hope you're having a fantastic day, and I'm so happy you made it because today we're getting into the nitty gritty, talking about all of the things that stuck out to me while I was reading A Court of Mist and Fury. So, things that stuck out, how it's relevant to this series, how it could be relevant to Throne of Glass, Crescent City, all of the above. We're going to get into it. So, let's dive right in. If you want early access to any of the podcast episodes, or if you want access to the documents that I make for each episode, where I do the summary of the entire book as well as a separate theories page, you can find that on the Patreon. It's going to be patreon.com/bestfriendbookclubpodcast, and go support me over there. I would really appreciate it. But let's just jump right in. So we find out in chapter 2 of this book that Feyre's birthday is the longest night of the year, which is very fitting, obviously, because she ends up with Rhys. But, oh my gosh, I forgot to say, spoiler warning, if you have not read the rest of this series, if you have not read the rest of the ACOTAR series or Throne of Glass or Crescent City, you may come across spoilers for any of those things. So just do with that what you will, but this is your spoiler warning. Continuing on. So the fact that we know she ends up with Rhys and her birthday is the longest night of the year, I mean, it goes together. So love that little detail. However, her birthday also basically being on Christmas is just kind of like, I have a July birthday, so pretty far away from Christmas. You know, nice little break in between to figure out what I want for the next one. But I don't know. If your birthday's on a major holiday, how do you feel about that? Please let me know. If for whatever reason this is the first podcast you're listening to in this series, let me just start here. I am a Lucian apologist. I love Lucian. I think he's one of the best characters in the series. And Lucian, in the second chapter, he lies to Feyre about why he's limping. And it makes sense to me that he's so loyal to Tamlin. And in chapter 3, he literally says, Tamlin is my high lord. He gives an order, I follow it. So people are like, you know, praising the people of the inner circle for how loyal they are to Rhys. But when Lucian is loyal to Tamlin, they're like, how could he not be loyal to Feyre? Hello? Be so serious. So Feyre talks a little bit about how she doesn't like the outfits that she's getting put into and that she doesn't have the heart to tell Tamlin that she doesn't like these things. She also mentions that she wants to push back on certain things and then is like, it takes more energy than it's worth. To then blame him for not paying attention and noticing those things when she's just like, it's not even worth it to tell him, is a little crazy to me. Just a little crazy to me to be like, I don't feel like telling him. But how could he not notice? It's like, come on, he's got things going on. And I'm not a Tamlin lover, but it's like, if we're going to call out one character for doing something, like let's look at everyone. Oh my gosh. So then we find out that Ianthe was childhood friends with Tamlin, and so was Amarantha. And I just need to know why, because I feel like this tells you a lot about Tamlin's character, that his childhood friends were Ianthe and Amarantha. Ianthe's father sent her and her family to Valahan, which is on the continent, for the entirety of Amarantha's reign. Now, what I want to know is, how did her dad know that Amarantha was going to take over and kind of do what she did? Like, how did he know? It just says in the book that he sensed trouble coming, but I feel like there has to be something else happening there. I don't know if we will ever find out because Ianthe's, where she is. But anyway, so I made a note to myself that on page 19, Feyre talks about how beneficial it would be to have a match with Lucian, which we now know Elaine is matched with Lucian, but it says nearly as beneficial as one with Tamlin, the right hand of a High Lord, and another High Lord's son, which we can get to that later. And then it says any offspring would be powerful and coveted. So I feel like Lucian is a lot more powerful than we're made to believe. Like, there's little hints here and there. I think Lucian's going to be very powerful of whatever court he is the High Lord of, but I think he's going to be like a super crazy powerful High Lord. We can come back to that. On Feyre's wedding day, on page 40, so she's kind of fidgeting, getting ready to go into the ceremony, and it says that she toyed with some invisible fleck of dust on her skirts. And I just thought this was like such a, I don't know, it just connects directly to Rhys Mann as always picking invisible lint off of his clothing, and just as a way to comfort herself, like that's what she was doing. I don't know. It just stuck out to me, okay? So I'm having a hard time with understanding, is this bond between Rhys and Feyre the mating bond, or is it the bargain bond that allows them to speak mind to mind? Now, there's things that happen in later books that make me think that both can be true. Like, they have a mating bond, one, but two, they also had a bargain bond that allowed them to speak to each other. Because skipping way ahead to A Court of Wings and Ruin, when they make bargains with, we'll just say, when they make a bargain with the bone carver, she's able to tell him directly into his mind what orders she has for him. So I feel like you can have that conversation with having a bargain, but I think every time she talks about like, oh, through this bargain, it's not that, it's the mating bond. Because on page 47, she tells him to get out of her head, and he says, you send everything right down that bond. Now, that bond, that mating bond, perhaps. And then also it's described as she has this tug pulling her to Rhys. We know why. We know it's because they're mates. However, I just want to know, is it the bargain or is it the mating bond, or does it matter? Because I also will say, although we know that a mating bond exists between two other characters in this series that are, get their own POVs, we never see them speak mind to mind. So I have so many things to say about that couple, though, so I guess we'll just get there when we get there. When Rhys asks Feyre if anyone has ever told her that she's really powerful for being High Fae, I think this comes back to her mom being Fae or some type of being. I don't think their mom was just like a human, because how are her daughters mated to Fae if they were just human? But I do think that their mom was Fae. I don't know what other being she would be, so I want to say that I think their mom was Fae, and there's so many things that kind of point to that throughout the series, but I'll cover them as they come up. When Mor is introduced, it's said that she smelled like citrus and cinnamon. And so my friend Ashley was telling me about this theory she has that Mor is actually mated to Eris. And this is one of the times that, the Cauldron got it wrong, because obviously we know that Mor prefers females, as she told Feyre. And the fact that her scent is basically cinnamon, being one of the scents associated with the High Lady of, not the High Lady, the Lady of Autumn. When she's described, it's one of the scents that's described. It's one of the scents that's used to describe the Autumn Court. So she was telling me that she thinks Mor is actually mated to Eris, and that there's a lot more happening there, which I wouldn't be mad at. I do think that Eris is a good guy. Like, I don't think that he's as bad as we're made to believe he is. I think in the next two books, it's really going to come out that Eris was protecting Mor somehow. I don't know how. I didn't get that far, but that's what I got. Speaking of how strong Feyre is, there's literally a time that Tamlin comes up behind her, and I guess she didn't hear him, so he scared her, and she punched him in the stomach so hard that it had knocked him down, which she's got a little... She's packing a punch, okay? On page 72, Rhys and Feyre are talking about Tamlin and the King of Hybern, and she literally says the words, "He would never help the king." I mean, she was very clearly wrong, but he wasn't really helping the king. He was trying to help himself by using the king to get what he wanted. So, yes, he did help the king, but not for the reasons that they were thinking. It's also mentioned that Rhys has failed to capture the cereal twice. So he's talking to Feyre and he's like, you caught the cereal. And she's like, what? Like, it's hard? And he's like, yeah, I actually failed to catch it twice. I want to know what answers he was looking for when he was trying to capture the cereal. What did he want to know? And also, how was he not able to catch it? Most powerful High Lord in history can't figure out how to catch the cereal. Now that I'm thinking about it, the cereal kind of let itself get caught by Feyre. So maybe that's more playing into it, that the cereal wanted to talk to her, but I just found that interesting. When Feyre is returned to the Spring Court the first time, I want to know why Lucien was the one to notice she was back first and not Tamlin. She's in the room with Lucien and Tamlin, and Lucien's the one that's like, oh my god, you're back. Tamlin then, once he hears Lucien, is like, oh shit, she's back. But he's supposed to be obsessed with her, love her so much, and you don't notice when your girl's back. Am I looking too much into it? Because I'm like, Lucien looked out for her so much, and they had a friendship. Like, they clearly developed a friendship in the first book, and I just feel like they have a closer bond than Feyre and Tamlin ever did. Obviously, theirs was more romantic, but he didn't really know things about her the way that Lucien does. I don't know. I don't know. Maybe it's just because I love Lucien so much that I'm like, oh my god, he's so perfect. I hope this isn't annoying. So now is when I'm going to start keeping track of the amount of times that Feyre's power is mentioned and all the different powers that she has. I think, if I remember correctly, I basically stopped doing it in Wings and Ruin because it's just her reusing powers that we've seen already. But the first time we're really seeing it is when Feyre slips into Lucien's mind, and then she immediately burns the wood of the table with her hands. Those are two separate types of power that she's using. The third time she's using power is when she puts up this shield of wind around herself to protect herself from Tamlin's outburst, his famous outburst. So when Feyre's back in the Night Court, she's like, I could almost see the words in his eyes when she's talking about Rhys, and then it says, come on, play with me. I'm thinking that's him speaking into her mind. She just doesn't know it. But maybe I'm just delusional, or that's her being able to sense his thoughts because they are mates. I don't know. But I felt like that was like significant. And then 2 pages later, she says, again, I could feel the unspoken words. Ask me why. Push me about it. And I feel like this is her. I don't know. I feel like this is her being able to sense his thoughts somehow through whatever bond they have. This is your spoiler warning because this is a mention of Throne of Glass. But Rhys says that when he was under the mountain, he just kept telling himself who he was, what he had to protect. And that's what kept him from trying to take his own life. And this reminded me of Throne of Glass. I am Sam Cortland and I will not be afraid. And then how that evolves, but that's what that felt like to me. And it just felt really sweet. I don't know. I loved it. I love Throne of Glass. Moving on to the next time we see Feyre's powers, she grows claws, which we can assume is Tamlin's power. But okay, she can shapeshift. Ianthe tells Tamlin that there are some friends that she made across the sea that might be able to help with essentially breaking the bargain between Feyre and Rhys. I want to know what's going on the continent. I feel like we don't know enough about it. It's just this like, oh, it's happening over there, over there. I need to know. Also, I don't know if she's talking about across the sea, meaning Hybern, or across the sea, meaning in Valahan, where she was during Amarantha's reign. I interpreted that as Valahan on the continent, not Hybern, but that could have been what she was talking about because we know that the king broke the bargain between the two of them. When Tamlin throws in Feyre's face and he's like, you can barely sleep through the night, and that's the excuse he gives as to why she can't come with him to go do, I think he has to go fight something across the border. and he uses it as an excuse. That's just confirming that he knows she's getting up every night and he still does nothing about it, which is absolutely crazy work. So then we go from Tamlin acknowledging, I hear you throwing up and I do nothing about it because I'm trying to get my beauty rest, to then when Feyre wakes up in the night court, it says she swallowed and Rhys's head whipped to her. So she literally just swallows the spit in her mouth and Rhys is like, oh, you're awake. But Tamlin didn't notice when she walked into a room and when she's getting up, didn't notice, air quotes around, didn't notice when she's getting up and throwing up. Please be so serious. Feyre mentions that there are no cities left in the Mortal Lands. Well, the Mortal Lands of Prythian. And then she does say that there's some on the main continent full of art and learning and trade. And she talks about how Elaine had wanted to go. And I'm interested to see if we ever get to see this play out. The continent is talked about so much, but we're never actually seeing any of it. Chapter 15 is the first time that we're getting this mention that Amren could be different somehow. It says that she looks high fae, but something different prowls beneath her skin. So I'll kind of add on to that as we learn more information throughout the rest of the book, or the rest of the books. When Cassian is first introduced, it says there was something rough-hewn about his features, like he'd been made of wind and earth and flame. And I don't know why this just made me think of Crescent City, just the way that it was written. I could be completely insane, but I was like, huh, interesting. And then the scabbard that Cassian's knife sits in, I think that's what it, the scabbard of Cassian's knife. What's the scabbard? Is that the holding part? What is, hold on. Okay, it's like a sheath for a sword. Got it. So that has what's described as silver runes on it. And we see so many types of runes and whirls and swirls throughout this book, and it is definitely word marks. You can't tell me it's not. Like, you seriously cannot tell me it's not word marks. And it's like, oh, some ancient language. What could that be? What could that be? So Feyre describes Rhys as feeling like a wisp of shadow compared to the power that comes off of Amren. So that's actually insane, with him being the most powerful High Lord, and it's like, oh, he's nothing compared to what she's got going on over there. Amren was also for sure able to smell the mating bond between Feyre and Rhys the first time she met Feyre, because she kind of sniffs the air and tilts her head like, huh? Okay. And then I'm pretty sure Rhys just nods at her and we move on. We also find out Azriel is the bastard son of a lord. But who's his mother? What kind of being was his mother? I want to know why Cassian and Azriel are so much more powerful than all the other Illyrians, because the other Illyrians have a siphon, maybe two, to, channel their power. These guys each have 7. And I'm like, there has to be something more in their blood, in my head, for them to be able to be that powerful. I don't know. Maybe I'm just crashing out at this point. Who knows? Speaking of how powerful Cassian and Azriel are, when they're talking about Mor, Rhys says Mor is who I'll call. Rhys says Mor is who I'll call in when the armies fail, and Cassian and Azriel are both dead. Her power can't just be truth. She has to have some kind of other power. If she's more powerful than the 2 most powerful Illyrian warriors in history, please be so serious. What, she's going to tell the truth and now the war is going to end? Like, come on. You have to have something else going on there. And I really want to know what it is. It's driving me a little crazy. But it also is mentioned later that she was born stronger than anyone in her family. So I need to know what the fuck that means. And we also know she's capable of lying. So it's not like she has to tell the truth all the time. I don't know. On page 194, it talks about how Amren was sent to the prison before Prythian was even split into courts. This is also where there's mention of their world and how it was created, and there were rips in the fabric of the realm which creatures from other worlds could just walk right in. Now, I think that's how most of the creatures in the prison got into that world, but I'm just really interested to see how that all is going to get tied together later on. They also go to meet the bone carver, so I think the bone carver came from another world. I specifically think he came from the world of Throne of Glass, but he keeps asking Feyre, like, what happened when she died? He was like, there's no light, no portal, and I feel like that is, I don't know, it's so interesting to me that he specifically asks no portal, like there's no portal to another realm that you saw. I don't know. I just found that very interesting. I think he's trying to get back to the world of Throne of Glass because that's where he came from. I, of course, could be wrong, but I think that's where he was trying to go. And then his sister, the Weaver, is described as having rotting black pits where her eyes should be. Now, this just reminds me of the Valg. I don't know. She also has black blood. Need I say more? I just want to know how that all ties in. I think when they're at the Weaver's cottage that Rhys is speaking into her mind. She says that these words come from the darkness of her mind, but it says that the voice is her own. I think he's sending things down the bond to calm her and make her more level-headed so she can get what needs to get done and then get back to Rhys. But that's just my theory. We also find out in that chapter, which is chapter 22, that high priestesses have burrowed into dawn, day, and winter, which the three courts that rebelled against Amarantha were day, summer, and winter. So day and winter both had high priestesses like really sinking their claws in and happened to be the ones to rebel against Amarantha. Now, I don't know if that has anything to do with anything else. I don't know if that's relevant literally at all, but I just feel like I needed to make note of it. So the only difference is that Dawn also had high priestesses and did not rebel against Amarantha, and Summer did not have high priestesses and did rebel against Amarantha. In chapter 23, Feyre acknowledges that what happened under the mountain broke Tamlin the same way it broke her. So I think that people need to cut him a little bit of slack when he's doing the things that he's doing. He's trying to protect her in his little fucked up way, but he is trying to protect her because he loves her so much. And he literally watched her die the same way that we're like, well, Rhys watched her die. Yeah, and that's her mate. Cool. But Tamlin thought he was in love with her and also had to watch her die. So, like, cut him a little bit of slack, guys. Leave the man alone. And speaking of Tamlin, when they talk about the human realm, like when they talk about Feyre's family, it's mentioned that all of the fancy furniture, the nice house, all the stuff was paid for by Tamlin. I want to know when Tamlin stopped paying for their stuff, because he said he'd keep paying for it, but when she leaves to go with Rhys and is like, I'm never coming back, does he stop paying for it? I just want to know. There's several mentions throughout this entire series about Nesta being a queen, or referred to as a queen, or whatever. I do think there's more for her. She's going to have some kind of authority. She's going to be the queen of something. I just don't know what yet. And it says that Nesta was waiting at the head of the table, a queen ready to hold court. And when Rhys and Feyre are debriefing later, Feyre says that Nesta is her own creature, which I think is a very interesting choice of words. And I think that this is all going to turn into she's going to be queen of something. You can't tell me she's not going to, because it's mentioned so many times. I literally wrote that Rhys was apologizing for deceiving Feyre and basically using her as bait. And then I wrote Tamlin found dead. Like, that man was not apologizing to her. He's like, I'm doing this for you. No, you can't go do this. No, you can't do that. But I'm doing this to protect you. So when Feyre writes this note to Tamlin, the note reads, I left of my own free will. I am cared for and safe. I am grateful for all that you did for me, all that you gave. Please don't come looking for me. I'm not coming back. To me, that sounds like a note that like someone's holding a gun to your head and you're like, you need to write this note. It's like a ransom note almost. And I know he got that and was like, she can't read or write. So I know that wasn't her. Like, there's no way he read that note and was like, yep, I believe it. She's fine. Like, there's no way, guys. Come on. Then when we meet Nuala and Caradwyn, I hope I'm saying that right. I know I'm not, but the two wraiths, we meet them under the mountain, but when they're talked about in Mist and Fury, Amryn says, she's like, I don't even want to know how they were conceived because high fae will stick their cocks anywhere. Her words exactly. And what I want to know is how that happened. Is it giving like high fae and the bogue? The bog? No, I think it's the bogue. I don't know. Is it giving they stick it in this little cloud thing and now they got cloud babies? I don't know. I'm just trying to figure out like what two, obviously we have high fae on one side. What other creature could have mixed with the high fae to make these shadow wraiths? Moving on to Cassian and Azriel, I just found it interesting that when Rhys talks about how they handle having to kill people, Cassian will rip someone apart and then puke his guts up. He takes it very personally. He understands that it's a life that he's taking. But Azriel does not have the same feelings. He's very cold. The only time he shows feelings is for more. I really hate this, like, Azriel's pining for more storyline because I ultimately know they're not going to end up together because more straight up like, nah, he's not the one. But she won't just tell him that she's not interested. It just bothers me. It's giving pick me energy. But going back to Feyre, she's having a conversation with Cassian about how the tattoos that the Illyrians get is for luck and glory on the battlefield, which are the same style of tattoo that Rhys gave Feyre when he made the bargain with her for luck and glory when she was going into the battlefield of doing these trials for Amarantha. I just thought that was a really cute connection. I really love the connection between Cassian and Feyre that we see and the friendship that they have going on. And he's kind of checking in on her. He's joking with her. And when she burns through the pads, which I guess this is the third or fourth mention of her powers, but she physically burns through the training pads that Cassian's holding, he literally stands there with his hands up and is like ready for her to throw another punch at him, whatever it is that she needs to do to work through these emotions that she's feeling. And I just feel like he's a good friend to her, and I love Cassian. He's one of my favorite characters. And when that happens, it says that there's a flicker of approval through the bond between Rhys and Feyre. Which one? Which one? Do I sound crazy yet? Because I feel like I'm going a little crazy. But every time this is mentioned, I'm like, it's the mating bond, right? So I have a question. When talking about Tamlin, Feyre says that love can be a poison, and he basically loved her too much. Now the question I have, does Rhys love Feyre too much? And can his love eventually be a poison? Because Rhys loves Feyre more than Tamlin, correct? And if his love was too much, what's going on over here with Rhys? I don't know. I need to hear your opinion on this because I'm just like, Tamlin's love was too much. But Rhys also does some pretty questionable stuff throughout the series. I need to know your opinion. When they go to the Summer Court and Tarquin is talking about his desire to basically make lesser fairies equals to the high fae, I wonder if we're ever going to actually see this, because after that happens, I don't ever see Feyre refer to someone as a lesser fae. I think she just calls them fae, like with a lowercase f, and if someone's high fae, it's capitalized. I don't know if we're ever going to actually see Tarquin's wish come true. I really wish we saw more of Tarquin because I love him. I love the little bits and pieces that we get of him, and he just makes me happy. And when he asks Feyre to be the emissaries of the human realm for the Summer Court, did she ever take him up on that? Did anything ever come of that? Because after that trip, they got the blood rubies, and then he's like, I don't fuck with you anymore. So I guess she's not the emissary to the human realm for the Summer Court, but I would like to see that revisited. I guess as High Lady, she wouldn't be doing that because she's, busy with her own court, but I just wonder if he'll have someone else become his emissary to the human realm for the Summer Court. I believe this is the 5th time we see Feyre's powers, but she uses the little piece of Tarquin's power that she has to convince his mind that she's Tarquin, and then projects all of these positive thoughts about how her and Rhys and Amren, they're all harmless, they mean well. I really liked that use of the power. I thought that was really cool. When Amren and Feyre are going to get the Book of Breathings, or one of the halves of the Book of Breathings, they talk about how the doors are lead, and then it says that they used to line the sarcophagi of the great rulers with lead to keep the full force of their power in, because they thought that they'd one day awaken. So keep the full force of their power in with lead. I'm curious to see if this connects at all to Throne of Glass or Crescent City, because I don't remember off the top of my head, but once I get there, I can let you know. But I'm just I feel like that's such a specific thing, because then there's only one other time that we're seeing a lead door in this series. So we'll get there. The 6th time that Feyre uses her power, she's trying to convince the Lock that she is Tarquin, and she fully shapeshifts into Tarquin, which I think is absolutely insane. I love it. When Amren uses her power to heat the door to try to get them out of the building, it says that swirls and whirls radiated out as if they were a language of their own. I definitely think these are word marks. I don't think for a second that they're not. I want to talk briefly about winnowing. I don't know if I've mentioned this before, but it has to be so weird to just be minding your business and then someone just poof shows up in the room, because I would be startled all the time. What do you mean I could just be reading my book, doing something, and then all of a sudden someone's just in my room? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I don't like that. Okay, so Rhys says, this is a direct quote from the book, "I heard a legend that it was written in a tongue of mighty beings who feared the cauldron's power and made the book to combat it. Mighty beings who were here and then vanished. You're the only one who can uncode it," when he's talking to Amren. Where could they have vanished to? Could they have maybe gone to Crescent City, Throne of Glass? Who do we think wrote the Book of Breathings? Because that's who he's talking about. I'm really interested to see if we ever get that answer. I believe this is the 7th time that Feyre is using her powers, when Rhys is having a nightmare and she uses her darkness to soften his darkness. So she's using his power to calm him down. Love it. When we find out that Amren drinks blood instead of eating food, she's discussing that she prefers lamb or goat because it reminds her of another time and place. Now, I want to know what that is, what that time and place is. I'm assuming it's where she came from, but lamb and goat is giving to me more Throne of Glass than it's giving Crescent City. Unless she came from a world that's not one of those 3. She's not from Prythian, obviously. If she didn't come from Crescent City, didn't come from Throne of Glass. Interesting. So in chapter 40, when they have the meeting with the queens are like, "What's up with Feyre wearing a crown? Is that normal for your emissary to be wearing a crown?" And then she also wears a golden crown when they're at the Court of Nightmares. It's definitely, he was kind of marking his territory, so to speak, before actually marking his territory. But I just thought it was interesting that whenever he would dress her up for stuff, he would put a crown on her head. I really need to talk about this. So when Rhys tells Feyre everything that happened with Mor and Eris and all of that, Feyre then says that she understands why Rhys can't endure Nesta, because he couldn't let go of the anger where Nesta basically failed to help her sister. I think that's bullshit. To try to compare what Eris did to Mor versus what Nesta did to Feyre, I think are 2 very different things. Now, what happened to Mor, so Mor's family is the one that beat the shit out of her, nailed the note to her womb, dropped her off for Eris. And then Eris was like, I'm not going to touch her. So I guess he did nothing. And then with Feyre went out hunting to feed her family. And Nesta was like expecting their dad to do it because, that's their dad. I don't know. The anger that they feel towards Eris, I think there's more to the story than what we know about Eris, but the anger that they feel towards Eris, I think it's crazy to be like, yeah, we feel that same anger towards Nesta. Am I crazy? Because I could see how it's similar. Both of them did nothing. Eris did nothing. Nesta did nothing. However, I don't see how those are the same. Moving on to Rhysand's scent. I have just started paying attention to how everyone's scent is described, but I want to know why his scent is described as citrus and the sea. I would think that's more like Tarquin probably smells like the sea, salt. But I don't know what scent I would use to describe the night, but I just don't think that citrus and the sea makes sense. He's described like that several times. And I think he's previously been described to smell like jasmine and sometimes citrus, but more like in like the ending part of Mist and Fury, like when they're in Valaris, it says that he smells like the sea, but I don't know. So moving on to Starfall, Amren doesn't celebrate Starfall with them, and it says that something about it disturbs her, and we find out that it's a yearly migration of souls, not stars. And so I think maybe Amren came into the world during Starfall. Something about it being souls and it bothering Amren has to go hand in hand. Like, there's no way that those don't go together. When Feyre is describing her water animals, she says, quote, "They had come from the same dark origin, the same eternal well of power. Once, long ago, before language was invented and the world was new." How is her power so ancient? Is it because she has power from all the High Lords? But I'm just like, why does her power feel so old? I get why Nesta's power feels old because she has power from the cauldron, but I want to know why hers is described like that. And then I believe this is the 8th time her powers are used, but she makes the water animals and then she lights the clearing that they're in on fire. Love to see it. I don't really believe this theory, but I know that a lot of people believe the theory that Rhys is actually controlling Feyre's mind. And something that I think could point to that, this is on page 459. I think it's Lucien talking to Feyre, and he's like, what did he do to you? Did he take your mind? And he's cut off by Rhys, and Rhys is like, enough. Okay, then he says, Feyre and I are busy. Go back to your lands before I send your head as a reminder to my old friend about what happens when Spring Court flunkies set foot in my territory. Now, I just saw it as like, Lucien was like, did he take your mind? And Rhys was like, none of that. She doesn't need to hear that. You should go. I could see it just being like, oh, he's just protecting Feyre, but I could also see the theory of like, Rhys has been controlling Feyre this entire time. You tell me. Then the 9th time we see Feyre's powers is when she grows these membranous wings, and then Lucien is like, peace out, girly, I'm leaving. She says that the human girl you knew died under the mountain. I have no interest in spending immortality as a High Lord's pet. But she literally refers to herself as Rhysand's pet when they go to the summer court. So she's like, I have no interest in being a pet, but she was. And she called herself that. So can someone please make that make sense? Switching gears over to Nesta, kind of. So Rhys talks about like magic needs release and it'll build up and drive you insane if you don't get it out. And this just made me think of Nesta, specifically in Silver Flames, when she's just like drowning herself in distractions. I feel like her magic's making her go crazy. I think that that's what's going on over there. The magic doesn't have any release. She's not letting it come out. But I also think the same could be happening with Elaine, because we don't really see Elaine. Elaine's always disappearing somewhere. We don't know what's going on. And I just think that that could be something that will be mentioned in book 6. I know I sound like I'm beating a dead horse, but Feyre describes feeling blinding pain through her bond with Rhys when he's hit with arrows. You can't tell me that's a bargain. That's her mate is getting hurt and she feels the pain. Oh my God, I'm sorry. Okay. The 10th time we see Feyre's powers, she's winnowing to find Rhys and she's tracking him. She then also shifts her eyes to be able to see at night. So Feyre is like, I'm tracking him. And, scent goes in 2 directions, but I know that it's this scent because her scent is attached to his scent, right? So that kind of brings me back to the thing with Moore. So I think that her scent's attached to Rhys because they're mates. I don't think it's attached to Rhys because of the little finger banging they had going on the night before. So I think that Rhys, what Feyre is smelling is the mating bond between her and Rhys. And I think that kind of goes back to Moore and the theory about her smelling like cinnamon, like her smelling like Eris because Eris is her mate. I don't know. I don't know if you guys have seen this, but the scene when the Suriels give him your blood, I don't know if you've seen Throne of Glass spoilers, but that people think that Rhysand was basically tricked into taking the blood oath from Throne of Glass. And it's described the same exact way in Throne of Glass. And now he has this blood oath with Feyre. I don't really know. I think it's just similar because she has the healing power in her blood. But I don't think that that's what that is because I feel like we would have seen that, seen that turn into something later on down the line. If that's what it was, if it was the blood oath and not just her healing him. I just think about this moment when Moore sees Amren's eyes painted in the cabin. She specifically says to paint Azriel's eyes next to Moore's and Cassian's next to Amren. Now, I don't know why it's the reason it stuck out to me is because she was like, oh, instead of being like, why don't you paint, the rest of our eyes? But she's like, no, put Azriel next to me and Cassian over there next to Amren. I don't know. Stop messing with Azriel's feelings. You're just pissing me off. When they're talking about the chains that Rhys is being held in or was being held in, it says that those chains are one of Hybern's greatest assets. It's stone delved from deep in their land, capable of nullifying a high fae's powers, even mine. Am I delusional? Or are these similar chains to the ones in Crescent City, but more specifically when Rune is captured? I don't know. Just the nullifying chains reminded me of Crescent City. And I believe there's some in Throne of Glass as well. When Rhys was telling the story about Amarantha before the whole Under the Mountain thing, he says that she was able to convince the other High Lords that she wanted peace. The only person that mistrusted her was Tamlin, and Tamlin was a childhood friend of hers and knew her the best. Why was no one listening to him? Explain. Why? The 11th time that we see Feyre's powers, it's basically her skin glowing with some inner light, and she later describes this light pouring out of her as starlight. Could that be important later? At the meeting with the mortal queens, it says that Nesta's throat bobbed, and she says, please. And Feyre says, I don't think I've ever heard that word from her mouth. What do you mean? You've known your sister for 20 years and she's never said please? I find it hard to believe, but I think it's also just trying to paint this picture that Nesta's a bitch and that, she finally said please. When describing Nesta, it says, I think Nesta feels everything, sees too much, sees and feels it all, and she burns with it. Keeping that wall up helps from being overwhelmed, from caring too greatly. Now, burns with it, I feel like that was intentional. Obviously, eventually leading to what we see in Silver Flames, but I just thought that was an interesting choice of words. When the human queen dies during the attack on Valaris, Feyre says that she felt the death whisper pass, and I want to know what that could possibly be from. Because Nesta is referred to as Lady Death later on, and I want to know if it's any kind of connection or if it's just her being like, oh, I feel her soul leave her body. I don't know. It just felt so important, I guess. Also during this battle, Amryn is seen fighting and literally just pointing and soldiers die, which we also see, I just thought of this, the Weaver do in the battle in Wings and Ruin. I wanted to know if this was a potential connection to Nesta, because when Nesta goes into the cauldron, she points at the King of Hybern, and then several times throughout other scenes in, I think it's mostly Wings and Ruin, but sometimes Silver Flames, she'll point at someone and she's like, this is you're next, basically. So I was just wondering if we're kind of getting to see that Nesta's going to be as powerful as Amryn. I don't know if she'll ever be that powerful, actually, but if her powers were similar to Amryn's in that she could fight like that. Amryn also has the ability to project images into other people's minds, which is what she did with the soldiers to convince them that they were drowning when Hybern attacked Valaris. I just want to keep tabs on the different things that she can do because I feel like we don't see it often. So just wanted to make note of that. Amryn was also able to unleash the soldiers' own nightmares on them until they died of terror, which is actually crazy. When Amryn is telling Feyre and Rhys not to put the pieces of the book together, she says that it will create a massive amount of power. So the direct quote is, "You won't just attract the King of Hybern. You'll draw enemies far older and more wretched, things that have long been asleep and should remain so." So we know she puts the two pieces of the book together. I want to know what else she woke up. What other beings could she have been talking about? At the end of that whole scene, someone, I think maybe Feyre, I don't know who's talking, but they were like, since Rhys can't winnow without being tracked, Mor and Azriel will winnow us all in. But the whole winnowing thing just confuses me because sometimes Azriel's being winnowed in by Rhys, or sometimes he's being winnowed in by Mor. Sometimes he's doing the winnowing. If he's capable of winnowing, why is he ever being taken by Rhys or Mor? I don't know. But then it said later on, I think in Frost and Starlight, that Azriel can't winnow. He does something similar to winnowing. So I don't know if it's like a longer distance thing. No clue. When Jurian is asking where Miriam is and Mor is like, she's dead, Jurian's like, you were always such a liar, Morrigan, is what he says. And it's like, how can you say that, but her gift is truth? I feel like her gift is lying, and she's lying about having the gift of truth, because what the fuck? Like, I feel like always it's like, she's more powerful. You can't tell me that she's not. Like, I think she's more powerful. Also, real quick, the King of Hybern is described as having black eyes. I feel like that's important. And obviously, I guess it doesn't matter now. But when someone's described as having black eyes, I just immediately am like, And then not the King of Hybern, but then if they have black eyes and black blood, I gotta look at you sideways. I just want to point out, Feyre is a woman of her word. She told Tamlin, if you bring me from here, if you take me from my mate, I will destroy you. I will destroy your court and everything you hold dear. And that she did. But she told him and he still took her. So what did he expect? When the King of Hybern sends out his power, like this wave of power, Rhys covers Feyre, but Cassian covers Azriel, which is what gets his wings all shredded. Cassian is such that man will die for his friends. And when Mor is trying to attack the king, she stops because Azriel cries out in pain because he's got that arrow in the chest and they keep doing something to it every time they misbehave. And the king says to her, "What a mighty queen you are." Now, this is the only time that I've seen Mor referred to as a queen, but I just thought it was very interesting. Nesta's referred to as a queen so many times, but to call Mor a queen, I thought was interesting. The entire chapter, this is 65, when they're in Hybern and trying to get the cauldron and all that, Lucien keeps stepping up for Elaine. He keeps... I love that man. And I completely disagree with this theory that Tamlin's actually Elaine's mate, because it says that Tamlin had a horrified look on his face and then Lucien is like, "Oh, you're my mate." And then people think that every time Lucien comes to visit that it's actually Tamlin glamored. I don't think for a second that's true. I think that Tamlin was horrified because he didn't expect the king to actually like turn her sister's fae, or I think he was more horrified like, oh shit, like the king just did that, not horrified that that's his mate. I don't think for a second that's his mate. Later on we do get mentions of, Elaine smelling like spring, or things like the wall that she keeps around her mind has thorns on it. I get it, but I'm also like, nah, Lucian's her man. I loved that Rhys immediately goes along with Feyre pretending that he had her under his control the entire time. That I was like, okay, I'm so glad he picked up on that. And then him and Cassian and Mora were like, right, yeah. How were you able to get out of that? During these last few chapters, there are a few mentions of Lucian's eye whirring and narrowing. And I just feel like that's him sensing some bullshit, because we find out later that his eye can see glamours and stuff like that. So I feel like he's like, what the fuck is going on here? But he's not saying anything because he doesn't want to be separated from Elaine. Again, I don't think Mora's power is truth. When she heals Asriel, it says she shoved her fingers over the wound, light flaring as her power knit bone and flesh and vein together. You cannot tell me that this girl's gift is just truth. And you also can't tell me that that's just something that all high fae can do, because otherwise, why would they need healers? Make that make sense. And the last thing in the last chapter was, so this is a direct quote. It says, "How did he break free of his control?" Lucien said flatly from behind us. Then quickly followed by, it says, "Lucian's metal eye narrowed as if he could sense the lie." I think he can see the glamour over her other tattooed arm, but I just love him so much. The way it says that he said it so flatly from behind them, just like, how'd you break free of his control? Like, he knows it's bullshit. And I find it so funny. But I really hope you enjoyed listening to this. If you made it this far, feel free to send me like a starfall emoji. You know the one I'm talking about, with all the like, it's like the little square and it's got the pretty little stars in it. The starfall emoji for today. But I really hope that you enjoyed this, and I'm so excited to talk about the rest of the books with you. Thank you so much for watching. If you want to connect with me on Instagram, on Instagram at bestfriend.bookclub for the podcast, or my Instagram is at simply serotonin. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.